This Phil and Marcia can really good. That's the old Phil.
Okay, let me get in. Amazon.
I like it. I like Amazon. I'm getting some of them used to it. Okay, here's the first picture. When did you get this? I just couldn't get it. Look how pretty little Kevin. He got all that. He's grinning for me. Like, I love it. Wait. I didn't know this at the time. It was green. I'm still not used to this phone. It's refurbished, but yeah, it's new enough. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just that he likes it. So this is the ring or GTV lumps. So I can keep it in all fingerprints and diamond ring.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Is that what
You ever go down that way?
You going?
Oh, see.
You just point. Now,
It's always had to come up with something different. I'm sure, I think she said yes, I didn't ask. Oh, because they're still going. So I hated how he said, is this for real? And he said, yes. I said, congratulations. So I'm sure she said yes. But he had told me about a month or two ago.
I know. Every now and then it's hard for me to come apart.
She didn't really. She knows that.
Sure.
Well, I say. Yeah, he's not sure what to do.
I didn't. I thought that was pretty neat. But it-
Then that's just, here's a picture. Maybe I should have left my phone on there.
It's something different. And of course, their mom just thinks about that. So here, the baby, I just like, but then I walked in because and she told that she, yeah, she can, I don't think that she. I think mommy was
No car.
Usually it's everybody.
But anyway. Probably more, they get ready for them I got some,
Test this microphone real quick. Does that seem extra loud to y'all, or is it good? Is it too loud?
I was gonna tell you something about that. When, we were off last Sunday, we listened to all
Yeah.
the sermons. There's a lot louder up there than out here.
A lot louder up there. Okay, I can adjust that. But in here itself, is this like? Does it sound like I'm yelling at you, or is this good?
If it does, we'll yell back.
Go yell back. All right. All right. Well, let me go adjust the. See, online this needs to be turned up a little bit. Let me
You
go.
know, I'm hard to hear anyway.
I thought you said you're louder up.
Yeah, louder up there. So this one needs to be turned up. Let me go. We may blow their eardrums out today if anybody's listening. Well, we'll see. If anybody's listening on live to this, or if I can remember to go do it, feel feel free to reach out and let us know if it's too loud or too quiet, and we'll try to. I won't be able to do it right now, but before next Sunday or Wednesday, we'll try to fix that. All right, we are in 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter 5. We started in that last week. Does anybody need a book? This is the one we're using. It's got the pink edge here. All right. 1 Timothy chapter 5 will be on, well, really page 11 in our workbook. And we'll pick up, we barely just got into it. We looked at verses 1 and 2 last week, and this was really instructions from Paul to Timothy on initially you say, well, the elderly, but then you also see younger people listed there as well. It's really how everyone is to be acting towards one another in the church. And we looked at how this rebuke not, when you look at the Greek there, and also compare it to other ways that this word is used, it doesn't mean, hey, don't correct. It doesn't mean don't speak up if somebody's in the wrong, but it means be mindful of how you do it. It's not in a way to just tear someone down, but in a way to, hey, let's correct this. Let's make sure that the right thing is being done, being taught, being said. And we also looked at various other examples in our Bibles where proper rebuke is used, and we're told to rebuke sharply. And we talked about, well, sharply, that sounds like it hurt, right? If something gets you that's sharp. And sometimes it does hurt. Sometimes a rebuke does hurt, but that shouldn't be the intention. The intention should be correction with God's word. And so then, as we get on here, we're going to look at this. 1 Timothy chapter 5 is really interesting because there's you can almost break it up into different headings that our Bibles don't even do. Like at the top of my Bible, it says the work of a good minister of Jesus Christ, which is true. But if you put in some subheadings, like you could say, hey, for older people, for younger people, then we're going to get into widows, then we're going to see elders, and there's these different categories, I guess you could say. And preachers are in here as well, of, hey, this is how within the church this stuff is supposed to work, how people are supposed to be dealing with, at times, rebuke and also encouragement and things like that. And so what we're getting into today is going to be widows. Now, if you remember, can you remember anywhere else in the New Testament where instructions for a church dealing with widows? If you can't remember the exact location, if you can kind of think of, can you think of where that has happened in our New Testaments? Titus, yeah, well, Titus will have that as well. Yep. What I'm trying to get at is in Acts. Okay, in Acts there were some. Think of what's going on in the early church, and people are coming around from all different backgrounds, all different economic statuses, all different cultures, all different languages, and that's really the issue you ran into in Acts. There was these specific widows from different culture and different languages that were being overlooked. There was a process set up to take care of the widows, and well, they didn't really have the same background or the same even language as, I guess you could say, the majority of the church there, and so they were being overlooked. And so that's where a lot of times we point to say, hey, this is really one of the first places we see deacons. And so people will say, well, these were the deacons put in charge of making sure that these widows from different cultures, different languages were not being overlooked in this process. So you got to think about, especially the times here. If a let me put it this way: what was a woman's primary responsibility here in the first century, even in culture? Married. Yeah, raising children and taking care of the home, right? Now, that didn't mean that they didn't have, I guess if put it in modern day times, side hustles, because we read about in Proverbs that godly woman, hey, she was also working, right? And so there was some, I guess you could say, side hustles then, but really her primary responsibility was the home. And then the man's primary responsibility was providing for that home, right? And so in that culture, if the man was to pass away, that woman is kind of left without the ability to really take care of herself. Even in the Old Testament, we see there were provisions given where the crops, as farmers would harvest their fields, if they missed some sections, they weren't supposed to go back and make sure they get every little piece. They're supposed to leave that for those that couldn't provide for themselves. And so it was common to see widows going out there and gathering those things that maybe would have fallen off the cart, or maybe if you think of a corner of a field and you know, they didn't have quite the equipment we have now, and it would have been kind of difficult to pull that ox forward and then back and then forward. And no, you just kind of leave that corner, and that leaves that provision there for the widows. So think about that culture where, well, God has always had ways for his people to provide. Well, here's the new covenant, right? And there are these women still in this culture where they, really once the husband has passed away, they're no longer in their father's house, right? There's not really a way for them to provide for themselves. And so, well, we see in Acts, the church is providing for them. Okay, you think the early church, and you picture what we see in Acts 2, and people are coming together, and if anybody has a need, those that have excess, they're selling their stuff. They're selling just about everything they own to make sure that nobody is lacking. So you see this happening in the world, and you're out in the world, you see this church coming together, and they're providing for these widows, they're providing for each other. What's the risk there? If somebody in the world is seeing the church, and it's a risk even today at times, just providing financially or materially for those that don't have. Okay, yeah, hey, look at that church. Everybody that's there, they're making sure they don't need for anything. Maybe I can be lazy, right? There could be that, maybe I can just head over there and I don't have to do anything else. I can just prop my feet up and tell them, well, I have no way to provide for myself, so bring it on. Bring on the material blessings, right? And what we see here is so useful for us, and we I think at times only look at this from the perspective of these widows that can't provide for themselves. But really, we could apply a lot of these principles to any benevolence need, anytime benevolence comes up, right? This shows us that God doesn't just want us just throwing our money at those that ask for it, right? We should be good stewards of that. And so that's what we're going to see here as we look at 1 Timothy 5 is these instructions specifically on how to support the widows and how not to be taken advantage of. But as you look at it, you can kind of apply this to some other situations as well. Let's go ahead. Let's look at verse 3. And again, remember, here in Ephesus, most likely Paul is writing to Timothy about this because when Paul was there, he already saw some kind of issue, right? It's not just something random, or maybe there was a complaint that Paul got, and he thought, that is a concern, and so I'm going to write to Timothy and tell him how to deal with this. So look at verse 3. I am mainly in the King James. I do have a few other references. But it says, verse 3 says, honor widows who are widows indeed. All right, I'm just going to stop there. Something really important to note. When we read the word honor in our Bibles, there are a few words that are translated, when they're translated over into English, that come over as honor. And so, what does honor mean to y'all? Anybody? Show respect. I think that's where most of the time our heads go, right? Honor widows who are widows indeed. Hey, show respect to them, right? Anybody else? I think that's probably where our minds go generally right away. Now, sometimes when you read the word honor in your New Testament, it goes beyond respect. It can mean provide for materially. It can mean provide for monetarily, right? So, and that's really the way it's used here. It's leaning more towards that. And I can show you as we continue to look through here how we know that. But this is leaning more towards not just a respect, but a provide for. Okay, so again, you think especially the culture where these women could not really provide for themselves in a lot of instances. And you've got this command here to honor them. Help them out materially. Help them out financially. Okay? And then there's another part there, though. He doesn't just say honor widows and then leave it. He said, who are widows indeed. Does anybody else have another translation that says something different there in verse 3 other than honor widows who are widows indeed?
CSB says support widows who are genuinely in need.
Oh, which one is that?
Christian Standard Bible.
Okay, CSV. All right. Who are truly. So yours said genuinely in need. And it said, yours actually, the first word there, what was it? Support. Okay, that's probably, at least for this verse, that's probably a better translation for getting the idea here. Not just honor, but support. And then yours was, what was the word there? Truly widows. Genuinely or truly. Oh, really? Who are really widows. Is that what it says? All right, so see how that helps to get the idea here of what the point he's trying to get across. If you read honor widows who are widows indeed, you might just be like, isn't that kind of saying the same thing? Honor widows who are widows. Well, this is saying honor widows who are genuinely, truly, really. Make sure that they're actual widows. Now, well, that should be easy, right? Well, he's going to tell us what a genuine widow is here. Again, for means of support. Which widows within the early church should be supported by the church? Which one are genuinely widows? Again, somebody could see that the church is helping widows. Or maybe they see that the church is helping single women. And they say, you know what, I could go and I could say, yeah, I'm part of that group. And then they'll just support me. They'll give me financial support. Okay, so Paul's trying to help that not happen here. All right. Let's look at the next couple of verses. We'll get to our book, maybe not even today, but we'll get into our book. I just think it's helpful to really understand what he's saying here. Verse 4 and 5. Really, he's going to describe. You can almost put widows into two categories here: the genuine. And then I wouldn't say not genuine, but the ones that really shouldn't be supported by the church, or that the church doesn't have an obligation to support. Let's put it that way. But if any widow have children or nephews Let them first learn to show piety at home and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. Now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusteth in God and continueth in supplications and prayers night and day. So a genuine widow, a widow that is supposed to be supported by the church. Well, if any widow have children or nephews, is what King James says. Any other translations there? If any widow have children or grandchildren. Okay, that is really the right word there, not nephews. Now, if somebody had nephews, hopefully they would be supported as well if that's all they had. But the idea here is if any widow has children or grandchildren, all right, let them first show piety at home and requite their parents. All right, other translations might help here as well. Somebody just go ahead and read 4.
This is from the New American Standard.
Okay.
But if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God.
All right. You think about what is also happening. There could be a temptation for somebody's children or grandchildren to be attending church, be a part of the church, and say, you know what? If the church will support my mom or my grandma, that takes a lot of burden off of me. Then I don't have to be out financially. The church can just handle that, and then I have extra spending money. And this is saying, oh no, if a widow has children or grandchildren, hey, children and grandchildren, it's your responsibility. You are the one that's supposed to take care of them, not the church. Don't push that burden onto the church. So we get this idea of, okay, a widow is a widow indeed, or a widow in need, if she does not have anybody that is able to support her. Okay, so that's one thing. All right, well, as going through this checklist, we've looked at qualifications for different people in the church, right? This qualification for a widow indeed would be she's got nobody else. She's alone, right? She doesn't have children that can help support her. Again, that word there, nephews, is probably better translated as grandchildren. All right, interesting. Look at verse 5. Now she that is a widow indeed and desolate, so it's kind of reiterating desolate, right? That would be, hey, she's got no one. Trusteth in God and continueth in supplications and prayers night and day. All right. So it's saying if a widow is to be supported, again, we're talking financially by the early church here, by the church, they're supposed to trust in God. That one can be a little trickier, right? How can you, is there a way to tell if somebody trusts in God? Are there any ways to tell if somebody trusts in God? Okay, by their actions. How could you, in the early church, and we can just kind of brainstorm, how could you look at a widow and say, oh, she trusts in God? Could you look at anybody and say, oh, they definitely don't trust in God? Okay, and we're going to get into that example that she lived. This is kind of in the present tense too. Now, if somebody doesn't have a means to provide for themselves, there might be pressure to go figure out a way to provide for yourself instead of a part of the church, right? I mean, if you're desperate, if you're out of money, there could be a temptation to, I know it's the first day of the week, but I gotta go find a place. I gotta go find something to eat. I gotta go find something. I gotta worry about myself today. I can't be worried about the church. I can't be worried about God. I gotta go feed myself. And in today's culture, a lot of us would say, "Oh yeah, definitely. If you're not eating, you don't have any business coming to church. Go feed yourself." Does that show trust in God? No. All right, so somebody that trusts in God. Now, he also kind of tells us, Paul tells us right here, another way you can see if somebody trusts in God, right? In this desolate state where she has nobody else, what does she spend a lot of her time doing? What did we see there in verse 5? She spends a lot of time in prayer, right? She trusts in God. She doesn't have anybody to take care of her. And people know her as a praying woman, right? We see where her trust is. We see where she leans. The church can see that she's putting her trust in the one that can really sustain her, not just in this life, but in the eternal, right? She prays, it says, both day and night. It's easy for people today to say, "Oh no, don't judge." Christians are to have some judgment. You should be able to look and see some things that say, yes, that person is behaving like a Christian, or they are not, right? And you can see that in their lives. All right? Is this somebody that you can see in their life that they're trusting God? Is this somebody that you see in their life that they pray? And if not, Paul's saying, look, the church really shouldn't be supporting them, right? Now, let's pause for a minute and think in some other situations, right? If somebody claims to be a member of the church and you never see them, 2-3 times a year maybe, but when they get down financially, they come to church and say, "I need some money." Should the church maybe question whether or not they should be giving them money? If you apply the same logic, maybe the church should question that, right? Maybe we should question whether or not we're going to support them. That's what Paul's telling them to do with regards to widows, with regards to people that cannot take care of themselves. So, if this person is unfaithful in attendance, now, again, we're talking somebody that has the means to worship, right? If somebody physically can't get to worship, and they reach out to the church, we got to, again, use some judgment there. But we can say, all right, well, the church doesn't want to be taken advantage of, right? So this isn't something we're comfortable supporting here. And talk about some tough conversations with some of these widows, right? And today, some tough conversations. But God doesn't want us to just squander things, right? He wants us to be able to put that thought into it and make sure that those that we're supporting are worthy, right? Well, all right, explain it again. Hypothetically. Yes. So what we need to remember here, this is what is the church obligated to do, right? So, yep. Well, I mean, that's not really what Paul's teaching here. That's the thing, right? The question is the church obligated to take care of them? Now, also think about this. Children and grandchildren. Okay, providing for your children and grandchildren. God is pretty clear about responsibility, and we'll get into it here, for children and grandchildren to take care of parents and grandparents, right? You may not want to move your parents and grandparents in with you, right? You may not want to do that. But if that's the way to provide for them, that's what you do. You may not want to have to, and I'll say this too, in today's culture especially, people have a lot of things that they think they need that they don't really need, that are luxuries, right? Now, could the church say, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and support them because this children and grandchildren will not do it? I think you could, right? But what we're looking at here is the church obligated? If that person does not have children and grandchildren, they're alone, and they meet these other things, the church is obligated to support them. Does that make sense?
Always, I don't think we're always using society changes from those times to these times for excuses, and that's not what I'm doing here. In those days, that family probably all lived together, the father, mother, their kids, even grown kids, and families was living in the same household or together more than they are.
Most likely they would have already taken them in, right?
Most of them didn't take off and move them. Or the couple, they did some, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But not like it is now.
Yeah, well, it really just kind of depended. There's leave and cleave, right? And the idea was, hey, you are leaving, and sometimes they were. It was, hey, I'm a shepherd, and we're 300 miles away, and 300 miles for us, oh, you know what, I could go drive 300 miles and pick up my mom if she needed it. She could send me a message on Facebook, right? She wouldn't even have to call. I'd be there, right? They weren't going to be sending any Facebook messages or calling them, right? And so in that, hey, there could be somebody that doesn't have children or grandchildren, or they don't even know, right? They're in a foreign land. Well, church is obligated. They don't have them. They're desolate, right, to support them. A lot of times we'll look at these things and we will say, and we got to be careful, but we'll say, well, let's justify it based off of how our culture lives, right? We got to be real careful with doing that with the Bible, saying, well, our culture says this, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. If you use our culture as your guide, you're going to get in trouble in a lot of things, right? Now, again, what is the obligation? Does this mean the church can't help out some? No, it doesn't mean the church can't help out some in other instances. But if the church doesn't help out these that are described here, they're going to be in trouble when Jesus comes back. Right? They're going to have to answer for why they didn't follow Paul's instructions here. And more of this stuff is going to get answered. And if you have more questions or comments as we go, please feel free to ask. But, all right, puts trust in God. Okay? Alone, puts her trust in God, prays day and night. There's really no question whether or not this person is trusting in God, right? Now, look at, we'll go 1 Timothy 5. There's a repeated emphasis here that widows need that family support system. And it is that family support system's responsibility and duty to take care of them, right? And if they don't, that's where the church has no excuse for not helping if they meet these other qualifications here. Verse 4, right? The one we just read. If they have children or nephews. Verse 8, but if any provide not for his own, I know I'm jumping around, and especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. You know, I get that it might be hard to support a mother or grandmother. Or even in this, you could probably say a father that is unable to provide for himself, right? If you're looking at this verse. If any provide not for his own, especially for his own house. If you're not going to take care of your own family, there's a pretty powerful statement there. He has denied the faith. These people that might have been coming to the church saying, hey, I can just kind of dump off my parents on the church, and the church will take care of them. I can dump off my grandmother at the church will handle it, then I don't have to be out financially. He is worse than an infidel. What's an infidel? An unbeliever. Somebody that refuses to believe in God. You don't provide for your own house, you're worse off than somebody that just refuses to believe in God. I mean, when we think of somebody that refuses to believe in God, that's a pretty serious deal, right? If you don't have belief, you can't be saved, right? You're not even going to start the process of making your life right if you don't have belief. You're not going to honor God in any way. And if you don't take care of your parents, Paul's saying, you're worse than that. You might as well not believe in God. Don't even bother coming to church if you're going to refuse to take care of your widowed mother or grandmother. That is pretty strong. And that's what makes me kind of lean towards the idea here that, yes, this is instructions for widows to make sure that they're right. It's instructions for the church in a broader sense to make sure the church is supporting those that are supposed to. But it's also instruction. I'm wondering if there's some pretty sorry people there in Ephesus that have done this, that have basically said, not my responsibility. I'm not taking care of my family. You do it, church. And Paul, because for him to drill down on those people specifically in that way, to say you're worse than an unbeliever, you're worse than an infidel, somebody that refuses to believe in God, that is a serious deal there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's common, right? Now, in this culture, they didn't have state-funded nursing homes, right? And so you really saw the church jumping in there. The church should jump in even now, right? When there's situations like that, where the church says, no, this is not right. First of all, they need to go talk to those children, right? The church needs to say this. Look, we're warning you. The Bible is warning you that you're going through this life worse than an unbeliever if you're not going to provide for them, right? Don't just throw it off on someone else, right? And it's sad, but you see that often, right? Because it's an inconvenience to their what they want to do with their life, right? Right. And that's great. Sometimes that's not possible, right? But even when it's not possible, or even if maybe the person doesn't want that, right? They would rather still have somewhat of an independence, right? It doesn't take that responsibility off of the children and grandchildren to support them.
Well, back then, wife and few that hauled.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
like they are today, where it's, where men work.
I'm reminded of during COVID, we as a country, to protect the health of many of these, I would say, widows, right? Families weren't allowed to see them, right? And I hate that. It almost brings tears, right, to think about that. But I also saw great things done by the church. I didn't see it here, but I wasn't here, right? But I saw great things done by the church in that I saw preachers getting permission to sit outside the windows of nursing homes in order to ensure that these people could have service, right? Because people used to come by and pick them up. My grandmother was one of them, right? And so the church would gather outside of the windows. You know, they got permission for that because they saw this as, look, we've still got to support them. It's our responsibility. We have got to find a way to make sure that we're not falling into this category of not taking care of the widows, right? That are widows indeed. It's pretty sobering thought, and we learn from mistakes as well, right? And hope to do better as times go on. Let's see, verse. I have 16 noted, but I don't have it highlighted. If any man or woman that believeth have widows, let them relieve them, and let not the church be charged, that it may relieve them that are widows indeed. All right, there it is, emphasized again, right? If there is somebody that is a believer, if there's somebody that believes in God, is a member of the church, let the church not be charged with taking care of them. You do it, right? And so we see that repeated, that idea repeated multiple times. All right. Again, we can apply this directly to these widows indeed today, but we can also apply many of these things to others, right? I think if any man not provide for those of his own household, I mean, who is in your household? Your children, right? Your spouse. I know we said that the better translation for there was grandchildren, but nephews, right? Hey, if you know that somebody's not being provided for correctly, right? Do what you can. Take care of the members of your house. Don't just push it off on the church or what a lot of people do today on state-funded care, right? All right. Let's look. We've had one bell. Let me see how much time, because we got a few minutes here. Let's look at verses 9, drop down to 9 and 10. And here we're going to read some other qualifications here. For the church to consider these people as, hey, this is our duty, this is our responsibility. We need to make sure we're not also looped into this unbeliever category, that we need to make sure we support these widows indeed. Oh, I guess I was wrong. All right, verses 9 and 10. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different qualifications that I have written down for genuine widows. If you want to kind of do some homework and look at those 8 things, try to identify the 8 that I did, then maybe we'll be able to have even more discussion at the next class. But we'll go ahead and end it there. There's age requirements. There's other works requirements. There's all sorts of things that these people have to be known for to be considered worthy of this support. All right, thank you all.